Octavia! Vinley acted instinctively. Her horn flared at once. Half a dozen of Fane's slyboard rose up. Each became a sparkling blue missile, at least until Veron spun around and held Octavia in front of him like a shield, with her precaution honed by hundreds of hours, practice manipulating multiple Fanes at once and turntables. Vinley halted every single object in midair. Do you not see, Vendela? Your attachment to this pony makes you weak. If you truly meant to strike me down, you would not hesitate. Veron peered down at Octavia, smiling so she could see his fangs. Her eyes gleamed. He wasn't fully red yet, but he was still trying to hide his reactions either. Or maybe you're just deceiving yourself. Maybe you long around to return to me after all. Life was good when we traveled together. You miss that, don't you? Miss Pretty Vendela? That name. That damn name. My name is Vinley, and I'll never come back for you. Never say never, my dear. Octavia groaned. Her head edged upwards. Tavi? Hope flared. Was she still alive? Vinley could now see wound on Octavia's chest, a ring of red marked at the edge of Veron's hoofprint. Like the marks that Vinley herself had left the terrible tasting dough she had ever made that one time. Octavia tried to teach her how to bake. No doubt her ribs were broken, but Octavia was still alive. That was the most important thing. Octavia, baby, hold on. I'll get us out of this, I promise. An empty promise, I can assure you, Veron said mildly. I could snap her neck right now and be done with this charade. Don't you dare, Vinley said, but all but shrieked. He smiled. They actually smiled at her. This was all like some sort of big joke to him. It probably was. You should have developed some fire in your belly, Vendela. Maybe this little detour of mundane was not such a waste after all. I could confess when you deserted your Welfie to me, I was very angry at you. To choose death over your own father, and then to hide out you lied about it? Such behavior is not coming out of a dutiful daughter for your own father. But if living morals has given you some new fire, it may be worth something. I have more use for a fiery pony than I do for a milksop. He then tilted his head to find one side, as if considering his own outdated language. Of course, fire is the only useful thing that made the burn right of things. A fire that runs unchecked its useless leaves only behind ash. Vinley's mind retrograded from the possibility to possibility. Maybe she could levitate Octavia out of his grip or cause distraction. Outside, she was used to the fine controlling multiple strands of telekinesis at once. He had never known her before how she learned to do that. Or maybe, Vendela, you are not paying attention to me. The finest hint of irritation fringed in Veron's tone. Her breath so caught in her throat, and ice water washed through her veins. I apologize for your rudeness. Sir, she trampled down on herself. Veron frowned. It did not make him face any less handsome, but it did sharpen his features. He did look older, more like the truth that lurked beneath the smiles. Vendela, apologize, I shall irk. He didn't get any further. Quivering in his stomach was the knife that Octavia had secretly grabbed from the kitchen when he pinned her beside it. Her limbs were still controlled from how far she had been forced to bend, even get that. High right behind her, she gasped clearly, having jarred in her chest. Nevertheless, she shoved her backwards, jiggling to hilt like it was the last thing she ever do. Get away, Vinley! She wheezed while he's still distracted. Run! Wintersong, run! Run away and don't look back! Veron roared with pain and rage. In a blur of emotion, he lifted Octavia and slammed her against the kitchen floor. Her cry cut off. A red triangle, a red appeared on the tiles, cornered marked by a half-broken tooth. He was lifting her again when Vinley struck. A toaster smacked into his head before he could recover. A glowing blue electric mixer swept under the hooves from under him and slammed him against the hind leg. It hammered down again and again, matching the toaster's attack on his right leg and eliminating the flesh roar. While the machines tried to turn his bones to mush inside, plates, pots, pans, dishes flew from the cabinets to smash into his face. Sharp fragments of cautery rose up and jammed into whatsoever white fur and flesh they could find. Veron was forced to shield his eyes against hundreds of razor shards, which instead buried themselves into his forelegs and hooves. Kitchen drawers hung open, and cutlery shot out of silvery arrows. It was all out Catholic, unplanned assault that would not stop him in the long run. I bet Vinley was not interested in the long run. She just cared about getting Tavy away from him now. She then rushed and pulled Octavia away from him as she flailed. Octavia panted in agony. Vinley was forced to pull the strands of magic away from the assault to prop up the injured earth pony. No way she would be able to walk on her own anymore. If they were getting out of here, they were doing it under Vinley's powers. "Come on," she hissed, galloping to the wall. Octavia floated behind her like a marionette with tangled strings. If they could make it outside, they would be in a better position. This was a nice neighborhood, and Ponyville was a nice town full of nice ponies. The houses were far apart, since the street had been designed by city planners, who vowed to greenery over squeezing as many properties as possible. But if they could at least get Octavia somewhere safe, then maybe. She didn't see the dark shape waiting downstairs. If she had, she would have had been run past it through the front door. She might have been able to defend herself, even though through her horn, her mind strained to maintain such a divided music already. Instead, something heavy and laughing propelled into her back of speed. Her belly skidded along the hallway carpet, leaving clumps of white hair behind it from the friction. She instantly tried to turn over, but whoever just landed on her pinned her down. Grunting, she tried to peel off more strand of magic from her dwindling nerve reserves, blindly bull-wiping the telekinesis behind her. "Naughty!" giggled a voice in her ear. It sounded like what you would get from a mix between a nightingale with a hacksaw. "No using magic, naughty girl." Vinley would have gasped if she had been able. The mangled toaster landed on her welcome mat a few inches from her nose. Veron's roar was a terrible thing to hear. Vinley's mind but all locked up in terror. Only thoughts of Octavia kept her from being a gibbering mess of old apologies and fresh panic. She had retracted all telekinesis from the kitchen and concentrated on unlocking the door to quickly levitate Tavy through it. It didn't matter if she got away from herself. As long as Tavy was safe, some pony would find her and take her to the hospital. She had faith in the ponies of Ponyville and would not have let her injured mare lay in the streets unattended. She got as far as the doorknob. "Naughty girls must be punished. Nap time now." A hoof rocketed into the back of Vinley's head. Darkness had swallowed her. She crept back to the lair, like a mouse stealing food from the cat's bowl. All her stealth meant nothing. However, Veron only had to probe the link of how exactly where she was, so that he didn't immediately summon her to him as usual. But she wasn't complaining. She had slunk her designated room, closed all doors with a soft click, and sat on her bed that was not her own. Pictures of her, some Philly's family, stared accusingly at her from the dresser. The Philly in this room really belonged to the frame of herself. The photo had been taken at some part of dance recital, where she had posed on stage in a wonky absegroup. Her coat was a lovely shade of lavender. Her mane was sugary pink. Close to the camera was an older mare, who shared enough resemblance to be a relative. She was clapping her forehooves, buried in the applause, face lit by a grin. The moment, by many similar ones, a collection of happy events strung together to form a life in which Vandalia had no place. She got up to turn all the photos face down. She couldn't bring herself to throw them at the trash, but she couldn't stand them staring at her either. "I'm sorry, Clover," she whispered. She wished her only knowledge was through the pictures. No pony would have had to look at the photo and know what a pony sounded when they laughed over ice cream, and also they had cried, begging for their life. "I didn't want to. I'm sorry." If only Clover hadn't lived in this house. If only she hadn't been so socially awkward and dreadfully easy to be befriended. If only she hadn't been so lonely to ask questions that might have kept her alive. If only Veron could go and jump off a cliff instead of moving from town to town all the time. Vandalia's belly felt bloated. She had expected Veron to call her to him, Immediately she had eaten too much in preparation. Habitually, she wiped out the corners of her mouth. She was fastidious, but always felt that there were telltale signs of where she had been up to. She had never gotten past her first feeding, and when she had gone full-headed and ripped the rabbit to pieces, not ever his friendly scream, and had enough to wake her from her frenzy, she had come to a ladder, stained with extensively, that not a scrap of white fur was left. Ever since, she had kept herself so clean to another lifetime that teachers and friends had never might have ever get to whispered, OCD. She waited. Good girls waited. She hadn't waited for like a good girl, but beat a dog enough, she seems to learn obedience. Ponies are no different, not even monsters like her. She waited for hours. Dawn painted on the horizon purple, a mauve and then a delicate orange. The sky was completely blue and neighborhood stirring by the time Veron returned. He didn't usually risk compromising their secrecy by letting ponies see them entering or leaving the house. He must have had a good reason for doing so. What it could be made of Vandala's shudder. The front door opened and shut. Veron's hoof steps clattered against the tiled hall floor. Vandala? Her body bloated belly recoiled. Come here, sweetness. She couldn't resist a direct order. She did, however, drag her hooves as she left the Clover's room and descended into the stairs. Veron awaited at the bottom. He stood upright with a bundle of rags draped across his forelegs. Ah, there you are. Did you feed well last night? Yes, Daddy. Good, good. There was a strange gleam in his eyes. Come here. I have some pony I want you to meet. Meet? Eyed the bundle. It was moving. Her heart sank. She had prayed she hadn't brought something alive that she wanted to kill her in front of him. He did that sometimes. He wasn't so sure if it was a test of her loyalty, obedience, or something else. It might have just been he just enjoyed watching things die. It was bad enough when he brought her animals about that bundle. There was a hoof pick poking from the folds of fabric. A tiny, soft hoof not yet old enough to bear its own owner's weight. A white hoof. Shh. Veron's tone was gentle as a summer breeze. It's all right, little one. The hoof pressed against his nose. The owner giggled. Veron's smile showed every single one of his teeth. Vandala, say hello to your little sister. Her name is Willem. Suddenly, Vandala wanted to empty the contents of her belly all over the floor. The face was looking up from her. Outstretched bundle was adorable. A chubby foal in cheeks beginning to pinch and giggle, make like any other broody. She had held out her forelegs, demanding to be picked up. The only thing spoiled her appearance was the abundance of red stains around her mouth and the tiny fangs, indenting her lower lip. My first successful Pegasus get, Veron said proudly. Can you believe her mother's husband thought she was his? His screams were hilarious when he found her empty crib. Ba-ba! The foal then blew a raspy ba-ba-ba-da. We'll be moving on tonight. I have what I came for. Vandala's head snapped up. This was what he made her come here? This was the way he had made her do what she had still done? You will look after Venlum while I sleep. I will teach the both of you from now on. She is by far the youngest daughter I've ever brought into this fold, so maybe this age I'll make it more biddable than her persecutors. She may even survive as long as you have. I do what a Pegasus in the family, Veron said bitterly. Vandala swallowed. Daddy, I don't think... You do not think at all, sweetness. Something dark laced in his words. It was not an observation, but an order. You are not meant to think. You are just meant to do. But good girls do not question what their daddies tell them, Vandala. And do you wish to be a good girl? Do you not? Fear rattled in her spine. Yes, she squeaked. I do. Because what do bad girls get? Punished? Indeed they do. And it has been so very long since I have to punish you, sweetness. It would be ashamed if you forced me to break that strength for your own misbehavior. He raised his eyes as in thought. Or break you? I'm not sure which. She swallowed and held her forelegs to accept the bundle. However, instead of passing it over like she expected, Veron put down the floor and peeled back the wrappings. It was a shredded, blood-stained baby blanket. "Sit here, Venelum. That's a good girl." The foal rocked back and forth, giggling and sucking her own hoof. She was too old to be for diapers, but didn't seem to know much language. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba? "Daddy's hungry after giving you some of his little blood, little one. If he needs to feed now." Veron held the foal's gaze directly. "Say here. Take like a good girl." The old panic rose inside Vandala like a column of ice. It lodged in her throat when Veron looked at her. The whole world seemed to be a bit cooler when he got that look. She knew better than to back away, but it was hard to fight down the instinct when he approached. "Lay down, Vandala. You know better than to keep Daddy waiting." Dutifully, she tucked her legs under her and rolled over. The motion made her nauseous. Veron looming over above made it worse. She shut her eyes, and she should be used to this by now. It shouldn't be this difficult anymore. She shouldn't mind. Good girls wanted their fathers to be happy. She wanted to be a good girl. So she wanted to be a good... She winced as her fangs pierced her up to her abdomen. They seemed to have lengthened when they were past fierce layer of skin and subconscious fat, stretching past what between him and his prize. When he began sucking, her throat tightened and the draining sensation. Her bloat subsided, but the nausea remained. When Vermont made a repressant noise, it was all he could do to try and cut out. When he was finished, he stayed where she was, made a dizzy and sudden loss of nutrients. He had taken more than usual. She opened her eyes in spinning room and had to wait until it stopped before getting another shaky hooves. She froze when she heard the sound of someone clapping. William giggled enthusiastically, the little forehooves tapping in what seemed to be a little approval. She was still exactly where Veron had told her to say. She had watched the whole thing. Immediately held her forelegs out, demanding that Veron pick her up. He did so, laughing when she insisted at hugging him and nuzzling him into an embrace like he really was her father. Vendela could only watch, soothed with the dread in sight. "There's my good girl."